So welcome everybody. We are Team Excelsior and this is our app, Le Chicken.
So Le Chicken is the story of a chicken who dreams of stardom and goes from living at a farm to ideally at the end starring in a movie, maybe having a couple of fans. So that's the heart of the story. Other than that, it's a language learning RPG, so role-playing game, currently based in French, since that seemed to be the easiest language to start it in. It is adaptable to other languages, so if this were to progress, we could create like an Italian version or a Spanish version. The great thing about this is that it is contextual learning. So I teach English as a second language to kids who are like 5 years old upwards to adults. And when someone is trying to learn a language, it solidifies a lot more easily when they're using it in a context rather than just like a classroom setting. So here, when you're introduced to a new word, you'll get to use it right away and repetitively in that context so that you will learn it. It also does progress to become more difficult as the game would continue on. This is just a tutorial area, so the words are still pretty simple. They're infinitives, so like to walk, to hit, to jump. But as it would go on, they would learn how to construct sentences.
So initially we settled on the Unity game engine with C# for our tech stack. C# was a language that we were all interested in learning. It's a highly desirable language in the job market right now and something we were all interested in. Also, after conducting some research, we found that using Unity with C# was a path that was well trodden by novice game developers, so there were lots of resources available. And with C# and Unity, we were actually able to have our minimum viable product up and running by the end of the second day. However, we found that the power of the Unity game engine was such that we weren't actually doing an awful lot of programming ourselves, and we weren't really learning a lot of C#. What we were learning, in fact, was how to use the Unity game engine. So after a long and fractious team meeting that evening, we decided to pivot and use JavaScript, which is a language that we have some familiarity with, having learned it for the last 4 or 5 weeks. And we decided to use it with the React Native framework, which we had 2 or 3 days really experience with. So it's something we all wanted to get more familiar with, and it allowed us to really flex our programming muscles. So we use React Native with Jest and React Native testing library for the unit tests, and Cypress for the feature tests, with Expo to export it in the development environment. And although it was much harder, I think we are much prouder of the result, the product as a result.
So throughout our project, we stuck as closely as possible to the Agile methodologies. So what this meant was every morning we would gather as a team. We'd check in with each other, make sure we're all doing okay. We'd look at the tasks, prioritize, work out what we needed doing in that next day or two. And then we would assign them to sub-teams and split up for the rest of the day. We'd make sure as much as possible to keep communication going throughout the day. Usually we would also have a meeting around lunchtime just to check in and make sure we can unblock any problems the other sub-teams would have. And then every evening we would then meet again as a whole and talk about how the day had gone, readjust priorities if need be, and then merge any sort of ready to go code into our finished product. The other thing we tried to do as much as possible was mix up those sub-teams. This is really good because it encouraged shared product ownership. It meant we all had a view of all of the code, and it encouraged learning as much as possible so we could see all the technologies in play.
We had a bit of a merge panic early on in week 2. A few of us decided we could save some time by merging some branches onto main late one night, but we ran into a really tricky bug. And after stressing ourselves out about it the entire night, it turned out to be a really easy fix the next morning as soon as we had everybody's eyes on it. So that was a big lesson in patience and making sure that everybody's on board and present whenever we made any changes to the main app. And as Charlie said, switching to React Native from Unity was a huge learning process in and of itself. None of us were hugely comfortable with React. We'd never used React Native specifically before, and we're all really proud of how much we managed to learn and what we got done with it in the 2 weeks.
So one of the biggest learnings for me throughout the project was choosing the right technology. And we've already talked about the move from Unity, but also once we'd settled on React Native, we were almost trying to bend that tool and that technology to our use state and to our idea. And I think as the project went on and we got more fluent in the language, we actually understood how the product was meant to be used and ended up having a much easier time and getting much better results out of it.
So the most important thing that I learned was how important it is to lay good foundations early on in a project. We spent some time towards the end of week 1 just reorganizing what we had into separate components with mostly single responsibilities. And that meant that in week 2, we progressed a lot faster than we thought we would, because everything was as it should be as the app gained in complexity.
As Dan mentioned earlier on, we were meeting up mornings, middays, evenings as well to check in, see how we're doing on the code. And I found this to be a very valuable learning curve because our team chemistry was on the right track. We were working really well together. We were constantly merging the code over, so we had the most up-to-date stuff, so we didn't have as many conflicts. I just felt staying on top of this meant this second week we were really calm, less stressed than we might have been, and it just made it an overall great experience.
I guess for me, one of the most important things that I learned was how important maths really is to this. So up to this point, I was able to kind of get around using a ton of maths, and my background isn't very maths based. But when we went to implement this maze feature, while conceptually and theoretically, it seems like a pretty easy thing to make, but when you have to account for different screen sizes, as well as different positionings of different objects that have to know where each other are, it gets really, really difficult. And so that's something that I definitely want to, I've learned that I want to brush up and learn further myself.
So without wishing to sound too schmaltzy, I learned the value of working in a team. Although studying on your own, you can learn things from YouTube tutorials, from documentation, you can learn syntax like that. But working with other people with different backgrounds, different strengths, knowledge bases, and different approaches to solving problems, I found really accelerated my learning and has led me to approach programming in a very different way. So I'm grateful for that.
Now on to a demo.
All right, let's turn the music on. And we can start a new game. So you see pour marcher, type marcher. So I guess that means to walk. And now we're at a door, so let's type ouvrir to open. And now we're at a maze. So if we check our dictionary, we see the directions are in there. So we'll go up, right, up, left, down, right, down, left, down, left again, up, and then now we are at our note. So we'll press to pick that up and we will add that to our dictionary. It's a frappe, to hit. Now we are in our next scene. So it's a chicken sitting on top of our next note. So let's fight. So we see frappe, to hit. And we won. So let's take that note. It says saute, to jump. We'll add that to our dictionary and walk around. Oh, so now we're in our next battle against a fence. So if I hit that, it's gonna hurt me because it's a fence. So it keeps on hurting me. So let's type saute to jump. And Now we're out. All right, let's.
Thank you for listening.